What up, everybody? Welcome to Coffee Hour. My name is Paul Abernathy, your host, and welcome to the show today. Today, we got a great show. We're going to be talking about overcurrent protection a little bit. We're going to get into some different little pieces. We may even looking at some time curve characteristics and let through charts and things like that if we get that far. But that's what we're going to be doing today here on Coffee Hour. And if you're rolling in here a little late, that's okay. It's all right, because I rolled in a little late, okay? Was busy thinking about what I wanted to do for the show today, and sometimes I think of things whether somebody sends something in or I think of something at the last minute. So anyway, thanks for joining us. As always, folks, I live vicariously through you. So if you come and join us, let us know who you are, where you're from, in the comments. If you're over on Instagram, which I don't think I have pushed live yet. So I'm sorry for those that are over on Instagram that happen to follow over on Instagram. Could be a little slow there. So again, welcome to Coffee Hour with me, Paul Abernathy, your host. All right. So again, only show I know of anywhere that is electrical, that talks electrical, that is focused on electrical, that type of thing. All right. Okay. So that's what we're going to do. Okay. So, all right. So today we're going to be talking overcurrent protective devices and kind of looking at a little bit, talking about some terms like RMS and current limitations or current limiters, all that kind of good stuff on today's episode, as well as look at the code where we need to for a little extra something. As always, if you have detailed questions that you want a lesson, we're not going to bogard our show to go down rabbit holes. So what you do is you go to use the resources that I give you. PaulAbernathy.com is where you submit questions and get detailed responses. So again, utilize PaulAbernathy.com. Of course, we have mobile apps, free mobile apps that you can download from our website. So make sure that you do that as well, because you can ask questions there. And so again, it's all about the easiest way to get things submitted and get your questions answered and that type of thing. But we have to be courteous of everybody and everybody's time when we do these shows. So just let me know who you are, where you're from. All right, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're just kind of go over overcurrent protection, sizes, switches, ratings, frame rates, fuses, circuit breakers, all that kind of good stuff. So if you have a topic or you have something that's germane to this specific topic, please, by all means, feel free to ask, and we will try to discuss it in that scenario. All right, let's do our shout outs, get that in over with so that we can kind of get into today's lesson and see how much we can actually cover. And again, a lot of times when I do these shows in the mornings, we're going to be doing a very high overview. But of course, if you have any question, it is germane, then feel free to ask. We can go into deeper things, but we really want to give you basic knowledge. And again, deeper understanding of these type of things are stuff that we cover in our Fast Tracks programs. Okay. And all those type of scenarios. So, all right. So let's see what do we got here. We've got Adam. Good morning. I am good, my friend. Again, woke up. She knew who I was. It's all good. Got almost a full cup of coffee. See how long that lasts. Let's see. What's up, Marlon? Thanks for joining us. Glad to have you here. SB's in the house. Good morning. Glad to have you here. Jonathan's in the house. Good morning. Glad to have you here, Jonathan, joining us for live coffee hour. People say, is this live? It is live. I don't know of any other electrical program out there. A lot of people do videos. A lot of people edit the videos. A lot of people look good on social media. At the end of the day, we've been doing this for long. And I've been online since all the way back in the early 90s, mid 90s, I guess. I can't remember the total first date that we started uploading these things to AOL repository. But I've been teaching people a long time. So it's not like we just started a channel, that type of thing. So let's see here. People say, Paul, you're new to the internet. You're new to social media. I don't think so. It's just, not as popular as some of the things that people like to follow. But, hey, it's all good. What's up, Santana? Nebraska? Good morning. Glad to have you here. What's up, Michael? Glad to have you here. Good morning. Welcome, as always. What's up, John? Hashtag win. Welcome, John. Glad to have you here. What's up, Jay? Welcome to the house of goodness, all code and all things electrical. Glad to have you here. Rob, melting toast. Good morning. And he's just shouting out to all you code nerds out there as well that join us here this morning. Let's see here. Good morning, Brandon. Glad to have you here. Let's see here. What we got here? Nice background. Yes, I'm out in the woods today. Just kind of chilling out in the woods. Nice little animated, or not animated. This one doesn't move. I have one that the lamps actually move around and swing, but it's very distracting. What's up, Manny? Glad to have you here. Look at that dog. I got something for that, Manny. There you go.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Big dog.
What's up, Alex? Glad to have you here, Alex, joining us over on the YouTube channel. Again, the show's available on all your favorite platforms except for TikTok. We don't stream live on TikTok. They have a problem with how that works for them. What's up? Oh, 5 a.m. Well, I better make it worth your while then if you're up at 5 a.m. What's up, Greg? Glad to have you here. Let's see here. What do you got going on? Day two, Paul. Good morning. Glad to have you here. Removing and installing a sign and electrical at the mall. There you go. Busy. Paul is busy at it. Good morning, Val. Glad to have you here. Dan. Good morning. Glad to have you here, Dan. Rob is in the house. I see Edward in there. Ellis, I see you in there, Edward, doing the hashtag win. Prefers to get in on the drawing than to say, what's up, peeps? I get it. It's all good, brother. Everybody's up in the house. Okay. All right. So let's kind of talk about it today. So let me give you let's kind of go look at our overview or objectives that we're going to have hopefully for this lesson, and whether we get it all in or not. But let's kind of go look at the objectives that we're going to have for today. All right. We're going to identify different classes and ratings of fuses and circuit breakers. What's up, Haas? Glad to have you here down the road right here in Richmond, Virginia. We're going to talk about the operation of fuses and circuit breakers. Again, should be a no-brainer, but it's always a good reminder. We're going to talk about interruptive ratings. What's up, John? Glad to have you here. Short circuit currents. Okay. We're going to talk about the amount of current and the time, and it's all relative, those type of things. We'll look at all that. We'll look at the different NEC requirements. Again, very high view of the NEC requirements for these overcurrent protected devices, readily accessible, all those kind of good stuff. And we'll again, if we got some time, we'll look at some time curves. Again, I often tell this, it's very popular online for some people to do, videos from Schneider and Square D, same company, Eaton and all those, to show the trip curves and how they overlap, and really great for latching, unlatching, all this kind of stuff. Really good for understanding these curves if you're an engineer. It's also important to understand the curves and how you do all this if you're doing selective coordination, whereas you want to make sure that if there's a fault, it clears the circuit closer to where the fault is rather than clear some kind of panel that's further upstream or breaker that's upstream, and then it takes everything off. We don't want it to take everything offline. If there's a fault, we want it to happen closer, the closest you can to the overcurrent device to where the fault takes place. That, in a nutshell, is selective coordination. So we have other requirements for selective coordination, whether we're working in some types of healthcare facilities, things like that. So you might have selective coordination. So you need to kind of understand how these trip curves work. But here's the real good news today for electricians. And I'm a realist, not going to be on an exam, so don't worry about exam prep. Realists today, I tell electricians, it's great to have this knowledge and I want to teach you the code. But we also have to remember there are certain things that you don't have to consume your brain with. And I'm a realist. I tell people, today, I don't need to understand fully the trip time curve characteristics and things like that, because all I've got to do is make sure that the manufacturer that's supplying me the equipment, whether it's, again, Square D, Schneider, or Eaton, or Siemens, or whoever. What's up, Red Dog?
Whoa, 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 whoa. Big dog.
I need to make sure that they know that selective coordination is required. So when I order that equipment, I make sure that they understand if that's a requirement for selective coordination, that they understand it, because that's the equipment they're going to supply to me. So again, I don't want you in the field to overthink these things. Again, I can sound really smart and talk about these curves and characteristics and peak lit through and all this stuff. And then for 90% of the people, it's just going to go right over their head because you don't use it in the field. You're like, well, I just want the knowledge. Well, the bad thing about some of those things is you will forget it. Okay. So I like to focus on the codes that you can look up. Trip curves and all that kind of stuff, you're not going to look up. If you're a design professional, that's one thing. You need to understand these, and the manufacturers can help you. So I guess my point is use the manufacturers as much as possible when it comes to, I'm not talking wire manufacturers. I'm talking circuit breakers, overcurrent protection device manufacturers, things like that. Use them as much as possible to help you design a system. Work smarter, not harder. I guess that's all I'm saying. All right, so we're going to be talking about all of that. Also, overcurrent protection is one of the most important components of an electrical system, obviously, because overcurrent doesn't just do what? Short circuit. It does short circuit, ground fault, and overload. All of those things combined, it makes up what's called overcurrent protection. So overcurrent is any effect that can put too much current on a system. That obviously can come from a short circuit. That can obviously come from a ground fault. And obviously you can overload a circuit and you're going to be putting too much current. So that makes sense, right? So that's how it's defined. It says the overcurrent device opens, let's see. Yusul said, what did Yusul said? Yusul says, I am the fourth father I never met. Well, we probably would get along a lot better than my own son, because it was zero relationship. Don't expect a call from him saying Happy Father's Day. No, it might be a pipe bomb or something. Anyway, so let's see here. So the overcurrent device what does an overcurrent device do? It opens an electrical circuit whenever there's a load, an overload, again, ground fault, and short circuit current. So that's just something to remember. When you have a conversation with somebody and you're talking overcurrent, remember that overcurrent encompasses more than just what you think about. It's overcurrent, which can happen, again, short circuit, ground fault, and overload. There's two types of protected devices commonly used, fuses and circuit breakers. Circuit breakers used a lot more today than fuses, although back in the day, fuses were the way to go. They're much more reliable at that point when it comes to early development, because it simply is a piece of metal in there that gets burned away and it just goes off. But circuit breakers have become very sophisticated, and it's become the predominant method of overcurrent protection. Of course, we have some that are set. There's a certain value, obviously stamped on it, and then you have some that are adjustable, things like that. Okay. So NEC table 240.6a lists the standard ampere ratings for fuses and non-adjustable circuit breakers. So most of those circuit breakers that you're going to have in your panels in the houses, stuff that you deal with, right, are going to be just a non-adjustable. It's a 20 amp, it's a 15 amp, it's a 30 amp. You can buy non-standard type of circuit breakers. You got standard and 240.6a, and then don't lose sight that you can use non-standard. Now, when the code is going to reference things like 240.4b, where we can go to the next standard size, then that's when you go to 240.6a, because you can always go to the next non-standard size that may be less. In other words, if it's 22 amps and the next standard size was 30, could I put a non-standard 25 amp on that? Absolutely, I could. You get what I'm saying? But the code would allow me to go to the 30 if it was the next standard size over whatever the amp rating is, or whatever the amps are that we need. So again, you do have standard breakers. They do make non-standard, okay? But we use the standard table in 240.6a in your code book in order to determine the standard size of the devices, okay? And non-adjustable type circuit breaker. Does that make sense? Hopefully. All right. And in 240.4b, okay, we'll look at that. It says we'll find that if amp passive conductor does not match a standard, I kind of just told you this, standard ampere rating of a fuse breaker, it is acceptable to use the next standards rating of 800 amps or less. But remember, nothing precludes me from using a non-standard, okay? So again, like I said, if it was 22 amps and there wasn't a 25 that was standard, I'm just using theories here, I'm just talking to you, then I could go up, if the next standard size was a 30, I could go to a 30 and the conductor would still be considered protected, even if it was sized at 22 amps, right? Or I could choose to go to a 25, which is non-standard. It's just not in the table. So I could go to the 30 and not have to go to the non-standard 25. That's kind of how it works, okay? Most of us just go to the standard size and it's considered fine. You always have to make sure that your conductor, though, can handle the load. So got to do a load count. If you don't understand any of that, make sure you watch my derating demystified video, and that explains neck sizing and ampacity and conductors and limitations at 110.14c at each end of the termination, as well as the wire and all that kind of stuff. Where do you get that video? Well, you're going to get that video, folks, by going to where? You're going to go right here, Fast Tracks Tube, and get a subscription. Fast Tracks Tube, best 99 bucks you'll ever spend, or you could win one here for free if you hang in to the end when we do the drawing, that type of thing. All right. Okay, then it says when protecting conductors with an overcurrent protection is greater than 800 amps, the overcurrent protection must not be greater than the conductor's ampacity. People forget this. So up to 800 amps, if we meet all the conditions, we can use the next size up rule, right? Next standard size, but we can't exceed 800. That means I could have a conductor that actually has an ampacity rating less than 800, terminate on an 800 amp overcurrent device, as long as my calculated load doesn't exceed whatever the ampacity is of the conductor, right? Well, when it comes to over 800 amps, we have to make sure that the overcurrent protected device is not greater than the ampacity of the conductors. Now, can the overcurrent device be less than the ampacity of the conductors? Absolutely it can. If I'm running parallel sets and it's 1200 amps, but I want to use a 1000 amp rated device on it, can I do that? Absolutely you can. Now, you have to understand the calculated load. I mean, it's not going to do you any good if you have over 1,000 amps of load and you're putting it on a 1,000 amp breaker. That's going to be a problem. But the concept of how you do this is okay, that type of thing. Everything, folks, in life, when it comes to talking about overcurrent protection and all that, it's so important that you know how to calculate the ampacity of a conductor. If you're in the field and you're an apprentice, or you're learning this stuff, or you're even maybe seasoned veteran, if you still have those concepts of ampacities that are bouncing around in your head and you're afraid to ask somebody, do me a favor, please ask. Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that you understand ampacities and protection and all that kind of other good stuff that's associated with a conductor and how you're protecting that conductor and what an overcurrent device, okay? So SB says, in a switchgear, would the relays be the primary overcurrent and the fuses be the secondary? Is the relay ever considered an overcurrent protection? I don't think a relay by definition wouldn't be an overcurrent protected device by definition. As far as the protection, your primary overcurrent protected device is going to be the main primary, the one that you hit, the one that protects everything downstream. That's a primary overcurrent protected device. I don't think we use the term primary and secondary. It's transformers we would, but I don't think that we use that term when it comes to overcurrent protection. You have your overcurrent protection, but we have what's called secondary overcurrent protection. So it's like overcurrent protection, and then downstream we can have secondary, like a piece of equipment that has individual fuses in it, but that's not the circuit that's supplying it. That would be the upstream. That would be what you hit first. Okay, if there's no overcurrent protection ahead of it, then that is your main overcurrent protection, and everything downstream of it would typically be secondary. And that can branch off into the different legs where they can have their own separate overcurrent protection. But if you have something ahead of all that, then that is your primary overcurrent protection. And of course, nothing says that you can't have secondary protection downstream. And usually that secondary protection is very specific to the circuit that it's coming. So a lot of this gear, you may have a main breaker, right, that protects it, feeds a bus, right? And then underneath it, you may have internal branches off of that or taps within the equipment or within the switch gear, which may drop it down to a lower rating, okay? So you have your overcurrent protection for the gear, and then you have the different separate feeder type of overcurrent protection because it's on the secondary side, okay? But it's built into the equipment. But it's going to have its own, so that would be specific overcurrent protection for the circuit that it's supplying. So you might have an overall, right? You might have an overall, and then it may come over and it may branch down into other circuits that go off of that. And they're going to have their own overcurrent protection because typically they are going to carry less current than you would be with the overall, that type of thing. So that's kind of how it's broken down in a switch gear, that type of thing. Okay. All right. Good morning, Angel. I see you in here. Rob, I see you here. Anselmo, I see you in here. Joseph, I see you in here from New Jersey. Poppy's in the house. So got all you in here. All right. Let's get back to this. Let's get into some lessons here. Okay. Now let's talk about. Let's start out with the disconnecting switches. Fused switches. Okay. So switches, disconnect switches that also have integral fusing are available in a ratings of 30, 60, 100. What's up, Chad? Glad to have you here. 200, 400, 600, 800, 1200, 16, 2000, 25, 3000, 5000, and 6000 amps. Okay. In both 250 volt rated and 600 volt rated. Okay. For most of these applications, you're probably just going to go straight 600 amp volt rated, but they do have some that are rated 250 volt ratings. What's up, Angel? Good morning. I am doing good, my friend. I cannot complain. So when it comes to this, I don't worry about this rating here for the 600 volts. If I'm dealing with a 30 and I'm dealing with a 60 or 100 or even a 200, let's say, if I'm dealing with a 120, 240 volt system, okay? Now, once I start dealing with 277s, 480s and whatnot, as you get further up into these frame rates or these fuse sizes, then you start worrying a little more. I mean, obviously, you're going to have to be aware of the ratings that you're dealing with when it comes to voltage. Okay, so and good news is, really, to be honest with you, this is pretty much taken care of by the manufacturer. You go shopping for a 1200 amp, then it's not going to be limited to 250 volts. Okay, I'm just saying, it's typically already taken care of by the manufacturer. Just good information to know. In the ratings. So they are available at 250 volts and 600 volts. Typically, the ampere ratings is going to dictate what the voltage rating is going to be for that. Switches may have labels that indicate their intended application. So you could have a switch that is specific for use in a specific application. It means it has a label, it has a specific intended use. Good example is you may have a switch that is rated for 3-phase, but it is not rated for single phase. And you may immediately think, well, if it's good for 3-phase, volts are volts, amps are amps, why can't I use it for single phase? It's not going to work that way. You need to make sure, and most of these disconnect switches are going to be marked and tell you whether it's good for single phase or 3-phase or both. But they do make, obviously, equipment that's good for single phase. And we don't want you to modify it or do something and try to use it because that's all you have available for a 3-phase application. Okay, so it's going to indicate its intended application. And all I can say, obviously, as an electrician, you follow exactly what the intended instructions are or the application for that piece of equipment. Again, you can reach out to the manufacturers. Don't be afraid. I mean, I get calls every day with people asking questions about wire and cable. MC cable applications. And we still have on the social media, by the way, shout out to whoever put that out on social media. We still have people on social media that are putting videos and challenging people about using anti-short bushings in MC cable. I mean, you do you, boo. That's what I always have to say to people. You do you. Are they required for MC? They are not. If you use a listed fitting, which you're required to use anyway, .6, 330. But it makes you feel better. It makes people feel better to see that bushing in there. Okay. So anyway, so the guy did a video on TikTok or whatever it was. I can't remember. Angry shared it with me. And it just still amazes me. And he's so nonchalant about it, him being so right about it. And that's a personal choice, right? That's a personal choice, but he's wrong. It is not required for MC cable to use an anti-short bushing. If you want to use it, knock yourself out, bro. But again, I can't stand these social medias that do this kind of stuff. Anyway, they talk about it and put a video out there, and then people watch it. And then other people believe it. And then they share it with other people. And that's where we get this thing where it's, no, you got to have an anti-short bushing on every MC cable installation. And now it gets propagated and people start believing that. And then we have to come back and go, no, it's not required. There is no way you're going to damage. Well, I've seen it damaged. It's probably damaged because of how you strip the cable. Okay. It's probably how you stripped it. It's probably your lack of knowledge on how to properly strip a cable. That's probably how it got damaged, right? But it has nothing to do with that connector. Okay, I'm just saying, well, I've seen it, Paul. I've seen it. No, you haven't. No, you haven't. You haven't. Come on, stop lying to yourself. You haven't seen it. Okay. All right, so here we go. All right, let's see here. So in the case of externally adjustable trip circuit breakers, because they have a little dial on it, right? You're dialing it up, you know, you get your little screwdriver and you're dialing this thing up, okay? Because you have cases where you can use an adjustable trip circuit breaker, okay? It says in the case of an externally adjustable trip circuit breaker, the rating is considered to be the breaker's maximum trip rating, 240.6b. So somebody wants to know what the rating is, and it's a 600 amp, and just because you can turn it back, the actual maximum trip rating, or the rating, is to be considered whatever the breaker's maximum trip rating is, okay? The fact that you can adjust it is really irrelevant, okay? That type of thing. Yeah, I agree, Yusel. The problem is certain social media can be a great thing, right? Social media really can be a good way to get messages out there quickly. But it's also a great way to rot the brain. And it doesn't matter what social event is going on, whether you love Trump, hate Trump, whether you believe in the immigration thing, whatever. And I'm not getting politicky, but at the end of the day, it doesn't take but a second for these BS things to come on where somebody's like they're doing the illegal immigration and they're playing videos now. This baby's crying in the background and they play this somber music. Like it used to be when you get those commercials about the helping the people that are starving is in the arms of an angel, fly away. And then it starts pulling at your heartstrings and you're like, I gotta give money. You do you. I give to St. Jude because I hate the thought of the little kids being, having to, but that's a choice. I hate that crap on social media. It's just, drives me crazy. But then all you got to do is go look at the count that's doing it. And they got like 50 followers, 65. You realize, dude, they just created this account to start crap. Okay. Just to start crap. And I'll tell you, people will believe anything. Now, I know my wife is going through this thing with the Alzheimer's and all, but you might have the same experience where somebody in your house, your family, right, will bring something they see on social media to you and say, I don't know if it's true or not. Come on. Let me get a hell yeah for everybody's head. Somebody in their household say that. Look, honey, I don't know if it's true or not. Well, if it's on social media, it's a 99% chance it's not true. I'm just saying, because but we love it. We love the quick blip, 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 blip. That's what made TikTok so famous, right? It only rots the brain cells 3 seconds at a time. Okay? Anyway. I don't know how I got on that crap. But that's what coffee hour is about. I'm bound to piss somebody off. You know what I'm saying? And it's okay. Because that's what electricians do. Okay? All right. Now, it says there's a new 240.6D in the 2023 NEC that covers remotely accessible, right? Remotely accessible adjustable trip circuit breakers required for cybersecurity assessment and certification. So they have this new rule that is in the NEC that talks about where you can have access to an adjustable trip circuit breaker, and it starts talking about the nuances of cybersecurity and having a system that is controlled remotely and how to make sure that it can't be hacked and all that kind of stuff, because that's becoming a real thing. And you put your let me put it to you this way. There is no damn way There's no damn way that a data centers today, and we got these data centers popping up everywhere because we're hungry for information, and it costs a lot. So all those tree huggers, okay, Greta Thunberg and all you, and I'm gonna piss somebody else off this morning, but that's okay. I don't care. Hug the tree. We got to save a tree. Okay, all right. But do you realize that the jet that you use to fly over to Europe burns up more fossil fuels and whatever? Do you realize that that's polluting do you realize that? But anyway, so cyber. So do you realize we all want this data, and all of the huggers though still want to be able to get their internet for their TikToks and everything, right? Well, it's got to go through data centers. Have you ever been to a data center? These data centers, God bless their heart, these data centers pull more power than some small cities. Where do you think that power's coming from? It ain't coming from solar, Jack. That might be, it might have their own microgrid and they might be adding to it. But let's face it, the one thing I like about that TV show Landman is the Billy Bob Thornton, which I think he's a liberal anyway, but that's okay. I still love him. I just say to him, don't talk politics because I don't want to ruin it for me. Okay, I used to love Willie Nelson until he got into politics, and I'm like, dude, and I might be the same way for you. You might love my stuff until I start talking politics, and you say, piss off on Paul. That's okay too. And I'm sure that's what Willie thinks, and I'm sure that's what Billy Bob thinks, and I'm sure that's what other people think, and that's okay. But for me, I look at it and I go, dude, the landman is reality. Those windmills, solar farms, all that kind of stuff ain't going to make one blip on the environmental map of our consumption of energy and power and pollution and all that. And until we get India and China and all those other countries to come on board, energy conservation ain't worth shit because they ain't doing nothing. Okay. I ain't even taught a damn lesson yet today, and then here we go. Yeah, data centers, 25,000 homes, okay? It's, it's just amazing to me. I am not, let's put it this way, I am not overly, I try not to be overly, y'all know where I politically align. But the reality is, I could be very easily gone straight down the middle and forget both parties. I want the common sense party. I want to do the shit that's right for America. I don't care about these deportations. I don't care. You're ripping them from their families. Send the whole damn family. You know, unfortunately, the kids have to suffer, but at the end of the day, let's understand it. They're kids. These are decisions that are made by the parents. And if a parent decides to come here illegally, when we take a father and rip them from their family because they committed some stupid ass crime that they probably shouldn't commit in the first place, right? And they put the father in jail. Are they not ripping them from the family? I mean, come on, send the whole damn family back. Now, do I believe in a melting pot? Absolutely. Do I believe we should let everybody come to America? Yep. Legally. Everybody that can come legally. I want you here. I want everybody. I'm not racist. I love every culture. I think everybody has, I believe in Catholics and Buddhists and even atheists have a right. I believe in everything like that, but to see it played out every day on the news drives me absolutely crazy as shit. I'm like, just have the common sense party. That's it. Paul for president, 2028. Y'all don't want me as president. That's for damn sure. All right. Okay. So disconnecting means it says, okay, the occupants of the various businesses in a commercial building must have access to the overcurrent devices for each occupant's brand circuit. So this is commonly seen on exams when it talks about if you have a multi-occupancy building, every tenant that has something in that building, whether it's, separate units, they must have access to their overcurrent protected devices, right? So the services may be somewhere where everybody can have, but they might be only accessible to those that are qualified. However, and that may be kept away somewhere else. They are accessible to who needs the qualified, and we'll go look at that in the code if we want. But at the end of the day, each occupant, right? Each occupant has to have access to their devices to be able to turn a circuit off, turn a circuit on, things like that. They may have somebody come in and do maintenance. Well, they have to have access to all these things, okay? So that is so important. So if we were looking at the code, just to go look at 240.24, 240.24, let's see if we can find it right here. I'll get us there, just so we can look at location on premises. I like to look at this type of stuff. So here's where we're at. Accessibility, right? We're under 240.4. 24, it says circuit breakers and switches containing fuses shall be readily accessible. Okay, we all know that what readily accessible means, right? That's a defined term, by the way. It says, and installed so that the center grip of the operating handle of the switch or circuit breaker, and again, when it says switch or circuit breaker, because you could have the switch that operates the knife connection on the fuses that are inside of the disconnect. Okay, so you wouldn't go by the switch, the fuses, you'd go by the handle, right? There you go. Okay, now, and it's when it's in its highest position, it can't be higher than 6'7", right? Above the floor or working platform. Now, what does that mean? Working platform. That means that you could be higher than 6'7" from the floor, but you're like, oh crap, how do I comply? Well, you could come in and put a working platform in, and then it's going to be a conversation between you and the inspector, okay? Where they go, did you just sit something on the floor for me to step on in order to reduce the height? Probably not going to win that argument. But if you're in a commercial setting, something like that, then you may have a working platform that would raise the disconnect up on a landing that would be higher than 6'7", but it's not higher than 6'7" from the actual working platform in relation to where the equipment is installed, okay, where the circuit breaker or fuse is being installed. Makes sense? Now, you do have some other allowances down here. We were talking supplemental overcurrent protection, for example. So the supplemental, not the main, okay, for the circuit, okay, not the main protection for the circuit, but possibly additional supplemental that's also added, right? Downstream, maybe integral to the equipment, maybe. Well, things like that. If it's deemed supplemental overcurrent protection, then in that scenario, then it does not have the same height restriction, that type of scenario. Okay. So anyway, and you do have some allowances here where you can use switching or sticks on a switch or something if it's located right next to a piece of equipment or adjacent to the equipment. And that's the example right here. If it's adjacent to it, then it shall be permitted to be reached by portable means. Means if you have a air handler that's up higher and you have the protection there, then you could use a ladder to get to it. It is immediately adjacent, right? It is right adjacent next to the equipment. And so that's, again, that's going to give you some allowances to be over the 6'7". Low-hanging fruit, by the way, right here on an electrical exam, okay? This kind of stuff I see on exams all the time because they want to know, they're talking about accessibility, okay? That type of thing. One thing in your mind, don't get the 6'7" ever confused with the space above your equipment, the dedicated equipment space, that type of thing. All those little things, which when you start seeing 6'7", 6'6" working spaces, you start seeing all this stuff. Don't let that all get loose up in that head and start bouncing around. The easiest way to bring these all back together is says, wait a minute. If it's a switch or fuse, it can't be higher than 6'7" to the highest position of the switch. And that one you remember is 6'7", and then the others will come back down to where you need to be. So kind of little mental things that you can do to try to get you there. Now, the one we're talking about here was occupancy. So again, each occupant, it says each occupant shall have ready access to all overcurrent devices protecting the conductor supplying that occupancy unless otherwise permitted in 240.24b1 and b2. Okay, so here's your service and protection. Okay, this is giving you some allowance where it's only accessible to authorized personnel. That's if it's a multi-occupant building or for guest room, guest suites. That would mean that there's no reason for you, a transient person coming into a hotel or motel, a guest room and guest suite. There ain't no damn reason for you to have access to the feeder or the service. Okay. Now, you may have access to the branch circuits. Again, there are other allowances down here that says supplying the branch circuit supplying overcurrent protective devices supplying guest room, guest suites, or sleeping rooms in dormitories without permanent provision for cooking shall be permitted to be accessible only by authorized management personnel. So there are rules where you don't have certain people that have access to this. One, because they don't need access. That's a very limited. Guests, transient people, dormitory, kids, okay, or young adults that, if you watch TikTok, ain't got no damn sense today. I don't want them near that crap anyway. I'd rather them call the maintenance for the building to if they trip something, whatever they're doing funky in their dorm room or something like that. I mean, you know what? If we're going to start not letting people put receptacles below a countertop in an island because we're worried about pulling stuff off the counter, then maybe we start designing dormitories so that these college students can't do some stupid shit. Because if you watch social media, we might as well wrap everything in bubble wrap because they're about as stupid as shit. I ain't lying. I watched some of these videos and I'm like, I didn't do that crap when I was in school. I don't understand it. I'm just saying. I'm being real with you folks this morning. I'm just telling you. All right, now, additional major concerns related to the location of overcurrent devices include that they are not permitted to, one, be exposed to physical damage. Obviously, you aren't going to put a disconnect switch in a location where it's going to be beat to death, right? I use a funny analogy when it comes to like SE cable running down the side of your driveway. If your driveway runs beside your house, I'm like, I'll argue that SE cable is not subject to physical damage when I'm driving. But if my wife is driving, that cable is 100% subject to physical damage because I've seen how she drives. All right, so I'm just saying. All right, now it also says be exposed to physical damage, be installed in the vicinity. Okay, so we're talking overcurrent devices here. Vicinity of easily ignitable materials, be installed in closed closets, can install, okay, overcurrent protected devices in closed closet, okay. Be installed in bathrooms, okay. Now you can have supplemental in the bathroom, means it's not your main device that's up at your panel or something. So it may be integral to the piece of equipment that's in a bathroom. That's different, okay. But again, it generally not, overcurrent protected devices that are not supplemental, or supplementary. Shower facilities, that's a no-brainer. Locker rooms with showers, what's the point? That's a common sense thing, okay? Or be installed over steps of any stairway. Absolutely. So we're not going to be putting any of these, devices in enclosures or whatever, and we're not going to mount these damn things over steps. Okay, that should go without saying. And of course, we can see what that says in the code right here. So again, we're still under, by the way. Okay, we're still under 240. So we're talking purely overcurrent devices. We're not talking like, well, the panel board. Panel board's nothing but the guts that the overcurrent devices mount onto. Okay, let's get that straight. Panel board, reference to panel boards, ain't nothing but the guts. That's not the whole enclosure. That's either a load center, or that's a remote distribution panel, or a distribution panel, or service equipment, or a feeder panel. Okay, that's what that is. Panel boards are the guts that go in this equipment, okay, in these cabinets, right? That's what that is. The circuit breaker or overcurrent device mounts onto the panel board, which is part of the guts that go in the cabinet, right, or enclosure. That was golden right there. That you should take that to the bank. All right. So anyway, we're talking about, okay, so here's where it says not exposed to physical damage. Okay. And then down here is not in vicinity of easily ignitable material. Okay. Now you notice something here. I will point this out. It says such as closed closet. I think so many people today see the words such as in the NEC and they go, well, such as means that this only applies to closed closet. No, this is not true. Overcurrent protective devices are not to be located in the vicinity of any easily ignitable material. That is something you're going to have to work out with your AHJ. What is considered easily ignitable material? And maybe it's not a closed closet. Maybe it's a utility closet. And you're like, hey, the engineer says I can put it in a utility closet. That's fine. What else is in that damn utility closet? If it is considered by the AHJ and lack of common sense, if there's easily ignitable material in there, then that overcurrent protected device mounted in a panel board in a cabinet in that location, not going to be good. Maybe it's just a disconnect switch. Maybe it's just a cutoff switch with fuses in it or whatnot. It's still overcurrent protection. It can't be where it's in the vicinity of easily ignitable material. Okay, well, we'll let y'all argue what easily ignitable material is, that type of thing. Okay, but it's very clear that it says such as closed closets to kind of give you an idea. So folks, anytime you see that in the code, by the way, where something says such as, that is not an all-inclusive list. That is just giving you some food for thought. You have to be enough common sense to look at it and go, well, this is not a closed closet where I want to put this overcurrent device, but it is easily ignitable material near it. And the answer is yes. Then you do something to section it off to remove that, to say, no, it's not anymore. I'm putting it in its own cabinet. So it's technically not. You do whatever mental gymnastics and working with your AHJ that you have to do. But if something's obviously, it doesn't just have to be a closed closet where this will be applicable. Okay. A lot of people want to hang their hat just on the fact that it says such as closed closet. So this only applies to closed closet. That is not true. That's why it says such as. They don't want to give you an all-inclusive list. Okay. Have to have some room for interpretation from the AHJs. They're the ones with the authority. And hopefully they got common sense to work with you. That type of thing. Okay. And I don't know if Instagram is going. It looks like it's stalled up again. I am probably going to stop streaming to Instagram, folks. I'm making a decision. I'm going to make an executive call. I'm going to stop streaming to Instagram because it just looks like it doesn't work. It doesn't integrate well with this morning. And I really don't have that many people that watch me over on Instagram anyway. So shout out to Instagram. Last episode on Instagram. Okay. Just going to get rid of it. That's how I roll. I don't like it. It's not working. It looks like it's stalled up. Y'all may be seeing it, but from my end, it looks stalled. I'm just cutting it off. We don't need it. Okay. And let's see. Hold on. We got to go back here. All right. So there you go. So now here's this one right here. Look, not located in bathrooms, right? So it says overcurrent protective devices. And notice it says other than supplementary. Remember I've been saying this? So it says other than supplementary, which may be integral to a piece of equipment that is in that bathroom, okay? Another thing to notice that this doesn't say commercial. This doesn't say, no, service equipment can't be, right? But we're sitting there going, this says not located in bathrooms, period. So, oh, by the way, I'm in the 2023 edition of the NEC. So if you're following along and you're in the 2020 or whatnot, this is the new, okay? Now, yeah, Instagram is weird anyway, and they don't play nice with these other platforms that we're allowed to stream on. So yeah, we're just going to get rid of that crap. There's only one thing I follow on Instagram is that sandwich cutie girl. Dude, I'm a guy. She is adorable. I watch her on everything. I'm like, damn, if I was 30 years younger or maybe 40, I could go to jail. So maybe 50 years younger. I don't know. She looks awful damn young. So I feel bad even when she pops up. I'm like, she could be my daughter. Never mind. But I look for a second. I'm just saying. I look for a second. All right. So not located in bathrooms. Overcurrent protection devices other than the supplemental shall not be located in bathrooms, shower facilities, or locker rooms and shower facilities. So y'all see that this is kind of tanned out a little bit. So this is an example of something that is new for 2023. Just a little more clarity in where we expect these things to be. But again, remember, other than supplemental. So again, one of the big arguments somebody could say is if I have overcurrent protection upstream, that any overcurrent protection downstream is supplementary overcurrent protection. Okay, that's what a lot of people will argue, that scenario. And okay, next is not located over steps. It says overcurrent protection devices shall not be located over steps of a stairway. Okay, so you're not going to put them over any steps. Now, people have asked me, can I put it in a landing? I don't know why you would, but okay. The answer is yeah. As long as on that landing, you have the working clearance, you have everything that you need to meet 110.26, guess what? As long as you've got that area Okay, and you've definitely got your depth because you don't want it to anything like a stairs and you get pulled away because you touch it and you go, you pull back and you fall backwards down steps. And we don't want that to happen. So you got to make sure that you have all of the normal clearances that you would need to have. But can you have it on a landing? Sure. Can you have it over stairways? No, you cannot. Okay. And just so we cover our craps and giggles, we want to go look at, let's see here. Let's go look at, I know somebody will ask. Let's see here. Hold on here. All right, there we go. Let's see here. I know somebody will go here. So overcurrent protection. Okay, supplementary. Somebody's going to ask, so I figure we'll go look at it. So what is supplementary overcurrent protection? It says a device intended to provide limited overcurrent protection for specific applications and utilization equipment such as luminaires and appliances. This limited protection is in addition to the protection provided in the required branch circuit by the branch circuit overcurrent protection rules. So whatever is up at the panel, that's the protection. Going out to the piece of equipment or whatnot, typically supplemental, okay? The definition of supplementary overcurrent protection device makes two important distinctions between overcurrent protection devices. First, the use of a supplementary device is specifically limited to the following application, to only a few applications, by the way. It says, second, where it is used, the supplementary device must be in addition to the protection by the more robust branch circuit overcurrent protection, which would be up at the source location, okay? It says the device used to provide overcurrent protection are different. The differences are found in the product standards UL 489, which is a molded case circuit breaker, molded case switches, and molded case enclosures. And of course, there's a separate UL standard 1077, which is for supplementary protectors for use in electrical equipment. Two different hierarchies of protection. Much more robust when you get up to the requirements of 489 for those molded case circuit breakers, and different standard when it is integral or part of a utilization equipment or a specific appliance, that type of thing, or even a luminaire that may have integral supplementary protection, okay? So it's important when people want to argue service in a feeder panel, we go, no, it doesn't necessarily meet that supplementary protection requirement, so they want to argue that bathroom thing. That, you get what I'm saying? Okay, so kind of interesting how that all works. All right, so anyway, let's get back to the lesson. All right. 240.24a says also requires that the center of the grip, okay, we saw this, the center grip of the disconnecting handle be at the highest position, at its highest position. Of course, if they're horizontal, then again, it doesn't matter, right? Because it's not going anywhere, it's horizontal. If it's a vertical, then it is on in the up position, right? Code requires. So it's on in the up position, so it's up. So that highest center point on that handle cannot be more than 6'7". Now, one of the funny things about this requirement for this switches is that I've had people say, well, what if I put a panel in and I put the panel in upside down, so you're coming in from the bottom and the main breaker's at the bottom. It doesn't matter as long as the panel is a line load panel, means it doesn't matter. It tells you that you can use it either way. Flip it around if you want. Okay? It wouldn't work if you had a main breaker with on in the up position and you turn it down and now the on is no longer in the up position. It's there in the down position. That's a dead giveaway that is not going to work. Now, most of those panels that are flippable usually have the main breaker that is horizontal, so it doesn't affect it either way. And then usually stamped in it, it'll say line load, and you'll say line, and it'll have a slash, and it'll say load, and that means on both sides. So it doesn't matter which way you install it. Okay, that type of thing doesn't make a difference because all of the overcurrent devices will work horizontally. They won't work vertically, and so you don't have an issue of worrying about the on and the up position issue. Okay, so again, you'll know it when your panel allows you to mount it either way, that type of thing. But the key thing is, I had somebody ask me one time and said, Paul, if I put a panel in, I turn it upside down because it can be, and I put it higher, and all the breakers that are in it at the time of the inspection are not higher than 6'7", but there are spaces on the panel board that would go higher than 6 foot. Can the inspector turn you down? Well, the thing about that is every inspector's different, every jurisdiction's different, but we're supposed to be inspectors, not expectors. So do you have the possibility of violating the code by putting it higher than 6.7 in those open spaces? Yes, you do. Are they there at the time of my inspection? No, they're not. Because I'm not going to reject you for having overcurrent devices higher than 6'7" if they're not there. Okay. So again, that is one of those things where your HJ may have a separate rule, right? They may write a rule. That's the kind of rules that they write that I don't have a problem with these kind of amendments. I have amendments when they do something else to the code to circumvent it. This is this is where a jurisdiction may say, well, look, because you have the possibility to locate these overcurrent devices higher than 6.7 due to the nature of how you installed this enclosure, then we will consider them as if there was a breaker installed in every available space. And that means that you would be, so you'll have to relocate your panel to the point where no matter if they put it in the breaker in now or put it in later, it could never be higher than 6'7". That kind of amendment I have no problem with because that's kind of governing the installer, not the NEC. That's governing the installation. We're not writing an amendment that circumvents the NEC. They're writing an amendment that dictates installation practice. I don't have a problem with that if that's common in your area. And jurisdictions have written that and done that many times. Okay? So anyway, now you see how I think on certain things like that. All right. Knowledge check. Let's see if how knowledgeable you folks are real quick. It says, capable of being reached quickly for operation, renewal, and inspection without requiring those to whom ready access is requisite to take action, such as to use tools other than keys, to climb over or under, to remove obstacles, or to resort to portable ladders and so forth, is the definition of what? What's this a definition of? Now, first of all, on an exam, if you see something like this, you're not going to get them that says this. They're not going to say, is a definition of. They're probably going to stop right here, or they're going to give you the definition maybe from the code book, but they're not going to tell you that it's no, think again, Frank. Look at the answer. 2 words. See how quickly you could get it wrong on an exam? Because they're probably going to give you that, no fill in the blank. They're probably going to give you what you put, Frank, as one of the answers. That type of thing. But of course, they're probably going to give you the answer and you're going to be able to get it. But remember, there's a difference between accessible and there's a difference between readily accessible. Okay? So when the code says that something has to be accessible, right? Then again, the wiring behind a luminaire is accessible. Okay? Even though it's got the luminaire on it. Okay? So there's a distinct difference, right? So in this case, it has to be, and this kind of gives it away when it says whom ready access, okay? No, only 3 words, Van Man. Only 2 words here. Only 2 words. Think about it, guys, before you post. It's 2 words, okay? Capable of being reached quickly is a definition of readily accessible. 2 words. Right here. 2 spaces. Okay. So something that has to be readily accessible, like the overcurrent devices in your panel. I can't put stuff in front of it. I can't have to climb under to get to something, climb over to get to something. I can't put a refrigerator in front of it, right? I can't say that, well, the refrigerator's on wheels, so I can move it. Well, that may make it accessible, but if it's required to be readily accessible, I used to think to people all the time, I used to tell them, it has to be readily accessible so as that your 90-year-old grandmother can get to it, okay? And if they can't, then it's not readily accessible. You get what I'm saying? That's the threshold that I would use. Readily accessible is the worst case scenario. Somebody needs to get to it. They can't be obstructed. Climb over, climb under, and they don't have to use any special tools to do it. They don't. Readily accessible is like, okay, well, other than the fact that you can use keys. If you have keys, then that's fine. then it's still considered readily accessible. We do this in hotels and motels in the corridors all the time, okay? But we don't want to force us to have to use tools. A good example of this would be in a hot tub. A hydro massage bathtub. A hydro massage bathtub, if the disconnect is there, for example, and if we have a requirement for to be able to get to it is readily accessible, then we're not going to seal off the access to it, or we're not going to do it so that you put screws in there where I have to resort to a screwdriver to get to it, okay? Okay? So we have to be able to pull it off and get to it easy, right? Now, we're throwing you a bone by saying other than keys, because if it's keys is considered fine, even if it's behind something that's got a key on it, still considered accessible. That's fine. You have a lock on it with a lock and key, still considered accessible. And in some jurisdictions, they will argue that a combination lock will work, but that's not what it really says here. It says, without requiring those whom ready access is required to take action such as the use of a tool other than a key. So again, they have to be able to get to it and not have to do something. Think about this. If it's going to be a delay to get to something, then it's probably not readily accessible. You get me? A quick key, put a key in and turn it. They've gone out of their way in the code to say that other than for keys, everything else would render something not readily accessible. Now, people say, well, what about a panel with a cover on it? You got 4 screws on it. No, but the breakers, you open the cover, they're readily accessible. You can get to the switch. Okay, so all those kind of scenarios. Okay. All right. Fuses and circuit breakers. For general applications, the voltage rating, the continuous current rating, and interrupting rating, and the speed of response are factors that must be considered when selecting a proper fuse and circuit breaker. Right. So you'll hear people talk about trip curves again, times 0.1, 0.01. You'll hear people talk about all these things. They'll look at the rating of the actual fuse or circuit breaker, whether it's rated for continuous use or not. Most regular circuit breakers are not rated for continuous use because they're limited to 80%, but you can buy those that are rated for it. You can buy those that are considered what we call a 100% rating, all those type of things. So all these things you take into consideration whether you think about it or not, right? The interruptive rating on a fuse is very important. We look at things like 110.9. Okay, and we look at all those type of things to see whether or not that we have a circuit breaker or an overcurrent device in general, fuse or circuit breaker, that can handle the amount of available fault current. Whether we have something that is rated for the available fault current. All these type of things, we start to look at all those things in our design, right? Yeah, most of the manufacturers take care of that for you, or at least most of that, right? But you do have to be careful because you could say, well, look, I'm going to buy a residential panel. And it walks and talks and looks like a regular panel, okay? But you end up putting it in a situation where it's residential, but can you use it for commercial application? Not if it's designed for residential. You would use it in a commercial application. But if it's 12240 volt residential and it's 12240 volt commercial, then it may not have anything that prohibits that. If it's single phase, it's single phase, right? But what you may have to worry about is the rating of the AIC rating that would be on the device. And that is something that is going to be different possibly for a residential piece of equipment than what it would be on a commercial piece of equipment. And it's all going to have to do with what your available fault current is at that moment, at that time in the system, okay? And the code is expanding to require a lot of this available fault current stuff to be taken into consideration, okay? So let's see. Rob says, what about those locks that have that you can use a coin to open? It's not a key. So basically, if it takes some type of tool, if it anything, I consider anything that you have to take to make it open other than a key, a tool. Other than that, it says specifically other than keys, but it doesn't say anything else, okay? So if it takes something, tool is being used very loosely here, then you need to just verify with your AHJ before you just go doing something, okay? Verify. It's just a question. Because again, it may seem obvious to you, but the AHJ may look at it differently. And that's what we have an AHJ for. That's the guardians, right? That's the one that we have to validate everything through. They might not know everything, but at the end of the day, if you're in a jurisdiction that requires inspections, right, then you have to validate. Okay. Now, what if you're in a jurisdiction that doesn't? What if you're in a county, you're out in Texas and it's the wild, wild west? You're still required to install things in accordance with the published NEC. Whether or not there's an inspection goes on or not, that's your honor system as an electrician. You have to follow the honor system. It's not about getting away with anything. You have to always do what's right. Like it or not, nobody's looking. That's the old saying I used to say. My dad used to tell me, always do what's right even when nobody's looking. And you never can go wrong. I get it. You might have used a tie wrap where you weren't supposed to, but I understand. You got to get it done. But at the end of the day, always have that mentality. What would you do if nobody's looking? Would you do it the same way as if everybody was looking? That type of thing. Well, I say that about emails. Don't put anything in an email you don't want to be on the 6 o'clock news, because it's liable to be on the 6 o'clock news. So always think about that when you send email. When I send emails at Encore and Prismium, I always think I'm not putting anything in an email that I wouldn't say to my CEO personally. I'm just saying, it's the way I live that's my credo. That's my no regrets. That's my credo. No regrets. I don't have one regret, one letter. Nope, no regrets. That's my credo. How many of you know that reference to that movie? Anyway, that's my credo. No regrets. Sure, not even one. Dad. Okay, anyway. All right, so there you go. Now, according to the NEC 110.4 and 110.9, the voltage rating of a fuse or circuit breaker must be equal to or greater than the voltage of the circuit in which the fuse or circuit breaker is to be used. That's a no damn brainer. That's a no damn brainer, right? If it's 120 volt rated, then here's where people get screwed up, okay? Check this out. So you have circuit breakers that are straight rated circuit breakers, right? And you have some that are split rated, okay? Like a breaker that's rated 120 to 40 application, it's telling you that when I'm using it, that I can use it 120 means it's one leg can connect to ground, or I can connect it with a 120 volt circuits as well as 240 volt circuits, okay? So if you get a straight breaker, for example, that says that it's good for 240 volts, then it is not to be used in an application where it could be 120 volt to ground. It is straight 240 volt. Okay, so the 120 240s means that it can be 120 to ground, whereas a straight 240, it can't. Okay, so it's important to understand, you just don't go to the truck and grab a circuit breaker. For example, I don't go grab a breaker, let's say, that is straight 240 and use it for a multi-wire branch circuit because it's straight 240. I need to find a breaker that's going to be a 120 240. Okay, if I want to use it and follow the rules of a multi-wire branch, these are little things that, this is why electricians get the big bucks, right? Because we got to, it's the devil is always in the little details, right? So we cannot use a breaker that is not rated for an application. So that's when we start getting those splits and those straight rated breakers, and we start looking at it, and we have to start digging into these little nuances. Well, the same here is I can't take a breaker that is going to be used on a circuit that has a voltage rating that's less than the circuit I'm going to be using it for, okay? That type of scenario. It's a little different than the straight versus the split rating of a breaker, but we'll probably look at that in a future episode. But I'm just trying to paint a picture here that I cannot use remember earlier, I can't use that 250 volt rated breaker on a 600 volt rated circuit, but I could use a 600 on a 250. Kind of what it's reminding it. But also, we're going to be worrying about the rating as far as of the available fault current that device can handle as well, especially in services and some feeder application. Okay. All right, so the continuous current rating of a protected device is the amperes that the device can continuously carry without interrupting the circuit. Okay, so if it is a current rated breaker, it means it's rated at 100% and it's rated for 20 amps. And guess what? It can carry 20 amp load on it indefinitely. Okay, and it's not going to affect it. Most circuit breakers, molded case circuit breakers, are going to be limited to 80%, which is the reciprocal of 125. That's why when we're sizing a conductor, or we know the actual amps, it's a continuous load, if we know it, then we take it at 125% to size the conductor. But we also use 210.20 to size the overcurrent device at what? 125% of the continuous load for sizing the breaker. Why? Because we know that the breaker's limited to 80. So what's the reciprocal? Take the breaker's rating and do that by what? Multiply that by 80%. And that's the maximum continuous load that you can have on that device. Okay? That makes sense? So hopefully you understand the reciprocals and how that all works. All right, here you go. So let's look at an example here. So here's 400 amps. Okay? 400 amp overcurrent device. So this says unless the overcurrent device, that's this, and the equipment that encloses it, okay, for operation at 100% of its rating, continuous loads are limited to not more than 80%. Kind of what I just told you. So here is a 400 amp device right here. This conductor is only rated. This conductor here is a 500 kc mils, good for 380 amps. So the load is 380 amps. Using the next size up rule, because this does not exceed 800 amps, and assuming you follow all of the rules that are in 240.4b, okay? We know y'all are not rule breakers, right? We know that. Well, maybe Thomas is a rule breaker. Just saying, maybe Thomas is a rule breaker. But if we're following the next size up rule and everything applies, then this is an example. But what you'll notice is that this conductor of 500 kc mil copper, always assume copper unless stated otherwise, is only good for a certain amps. So since an overcurrent device doesn't correspond, then it can be terminated on a 400. Well, as long as the conductor is sized to handle the load, no harm, no foul. Down here, it's a parallel application. Two 500s, 380 and 380 is 760. An overcurrent device doesn't correspond with 760. So the code says that we can do what? We can terminate that on the next standard size, which is an 800 amp overcurrent device, but the load itself can exceed the rating of the conductors. In this case, 760 amps. So you're going to have to do a load calculation. As Thomas says, calc. Load calcs. You got to know how to do them. You may become so complacent in the field today that you don't do a calculation. Be honest with me. Be honest with me now. You electricians that are following, do you do a load calculation on every dwelling you do? Do you do it? Load calculation. No, if you're commercial, you probably just follow the drawings. This is why I tell people all the time, just because people on social media go, you're not a real electrician because I do pipe bending all day. Dude, residential, commercial, industrial, doesn't matter. Electrons don't care, right? But the reality is we've got to a position now where most people don't know how to do calculations. That's why people struggle on exams with calculations. You know how to do the work. You know how to connect the wires. You know how to torque things, I hope. But at the end of the day, do you really know all the nuances? And that's what we try to teach in our programs, is try to get more than just what you need to pass an exam. Because trying to learn the code on your own is tough. You might get successful, but that's the reason we put the Fast Tracks programs together, is to try to systematically teach you. And hopefully you walk away learning something. That's the whole goal. And we're hoping that you retain it rather than just give you a bunch of videos and try to brainwash you into passing an exam. It's not how it works. I want you to be better beyond our courses. I want you to, when you're out in the field, to remember this stuff. That's why we go over these details, okay? All right, anyway, so this one is okay. Now look at this one. Well, you have 3. Now, that is going to be 380 times 3. That's 1140, okay? But notice right here, the round up rule is not allowed because this is over 800 amps. So these conductors have to be equal to or greater in current carrying ability as this device. So if you want to use 1200 amps, you're going to have parallel conductors that are going to give me at least 1200 amps. So you're either going to bump this thing up to a 600 kc mil, which may increase the size of your raceways. Maybe that's better. But if that's not the case, then you're going to have to run 4 parallel sets, and you might be able to go smaller than 500 because now you're doing 4 of them that you're going to be adding together. I don't care. It doesn't matter. The design is up to you. It's how you want to design it. But those things are so important to remember the scenario, okay? And one thing you'll notice, okay, is that in this scenario, we're dealing with applications where it's feeders, right? And because there is an overcurrent protected device. There are certain things that you can do differently under 230.90 with overload protection, because you're not going to have short circuit and ground fault protection on a service. So there are things that you have allowances in there for sizing and conductors and calculating the load that you can take advantage of. This one, because we're talking overcurrent protection, we're talking load side applications. That's where you would get into these type of things, okay? Important that you know difference, okay? That's what's so important about the NEC, is being able to realize what all you got going on. You got services, very limited protection on those service conductors. Only overload protection is available, not short circuit ground fault protection. And then, of course, then you get to the service, you get everything downstream, feeders and circuit breakers for branch circuits. Then we have to start worrying about all these additional rules, okay? Because we're only as good as that overcurrent protected device. So manufacturers of those devices, make sure you're doing your crap right, because we're relying on you. Don't want to be getting no recalls all the time for overcurrent protected devices. I'm just saying. What's up, David? Glad to have you here. Tony, I see you in here. Mike, I see you in here. All right, now, interruptive ratings is defined in the Article 100 of the NEC as the highest current at rated voltage that a device is identified to interrupt under standard test conditions. So the interruptive rating is the highest current rating, period, for that specific device under the standard test conditions, not abnormal test conditions, which could change the reaction time. They're tested, breakers, for example, they're tested in an environment that is more like open air than it is inside of an enclosure. And so there's a standard test procedure, and that's all they have to pass. These things aren't tested in worst case scenarios. So life can happen. So people get calls all the time, like in Arizona, where you have all these home inspectors out there that don't know what the hell they're talking about, or they call out obvious things because they like to get the clicks and they got their little fanboys following them. But that's a total different story, isn't it? So at the end of the day, all of this stuff is tested under standard conditions, like wire and cable. It's standard conditions. So when you call us about things like ambient temperatures or adjustment and corrections, we tell you to go to the code and we'll help you, but that doesn't change what our wire is rated at, okay? Or what we tested at. A lot of times people ask me, for example, Paul, they'll say, Paul, your non-metallic sheath cable, okay, NM cable, Romex is trade slang. It says, what about if it's in contact with the thermal foam? Is that going to cause a problem with the PVC jacket, yada, yada, yada? And my response, and all of the manufacturer's response is, I don't know. I'm going to say no because it's been done for years, but you know who you need to ask? You need to ask the manufacturer of the foam, because we're not going to test our cable jacket to every possible foam that's out there. Open cell, closed cell, oil-based, water-based, chemical. We're not doing it. We're going to tell you, go to the manufacturer of the foam. And the manufacturer of the foam, it's their responsibility to make sure their product is not detrimental to PVC or to other types of materials. That's their responsibility. They have the MSDS sheets that they have to worry about. Not us wire folks. Everybody wants to come to the wire folks for everything. And I'm like, dude, we just make wire. We just make wire. Well, what do you recommend for terminations, terminals? Well, we don't recommend you use, we don't care if you use antioxidant compound on aluminum or not. It's not required unless the equipment says it's required. We don't care if you use it or not. Well, I will always use it. Well, you do that. You do you, boo. But the reality is, at the end of the day, it's what the lug manufacturers want. It's what the equipment manufacturers want. So you're going to have to reach out to them. That's why you're professionals, because you can communicate with these different manufacturers and make sure you articulate your question to them accurately. You can get the answers you want as long as you articulate it properly. All right. All right. What's next here? Let's see here. Okay. An interruptive rating is the maximum rating that is a measure of the fuse or circuit breaker's ability. Okay. So we're talking about the maximum rating ability to safely open an electrical circuit under fault conditions. Okay. Such as a short circuit or ground fault. Okay. Oh, I should mention this about when I made the comment. Sorry. Thank you, Joseph. When I mentioned the comment about Arizona, for example, a circuit breaker is tested in an environment, but if it's put outside, right, and it's in the sun, because out there they do a lot of exterior panels, it's hot. It's hot in Arizona. And they put it, and the sun comes up, and the heat's boiling down on that panel. Well, maybe that circuit is loaded up anyway with a lot of loads that are on it. Well, if the ambient temperature gets elevated, it could make that breaker prematurely trip. And you'll have a home inspector, everybody say, oh, that circuit's overloaded, that circuit's overloaded. Well, it might not be overloaded. It might be the condition of use of where it's at. And it could be just that it gets, some of the questions I used to ask, it says, well, what's the average temperature out here? What's the ambient temperature? Is it facing the morning sun, or is it, in the midday, that irradiant period in the day? I think it's like 11 till 2. That is where the sun is, it's at its peak. Or like, is it in the sun all day? All this kind of stuff, right? And, and all these things can contribute to that. So what is my solution? I might be an electrician and I might go, well, let's see here. Well, my recommendation, if it keeps tripping, it might be to divide those loads up and try to distribute it out a little more for that specific breaker. I'm not going to redo your whole panel. If that's the only one you're having a problem with, that's what I'll do, right? And then the customer will go, guys, I wouldn't know this shit if I wasn't in the field at one point. So people tell me all the time, Paul's an educator online. He never worked in the field. Really? Really? I troubleshoot a lot of stuff for people. You think I just learned that by reading it in a book? Y'all know the difference. Anyway, so I go to the customer and I go, okay, well, here's a couple of things we could do. We could maybe look at finding a breaker that is a continuous use breaker. Not that easy to find for a plug-on. Okay, bolt-on, yeah. Plug-on, not so easy. And so it's going to take you time. So I'm like, well, maybe what we need to do is get in there and tell me what you do typically at this time of day, that when you're experiencing this tripping. Let's kind of replicate it, right? And I'm going to put an air probe in there. I'm going to see what the circuit's pulling. And then I'm going to look at other circuits in there and see, well, any that are really light. If I got no space available, I'm going to look at finding circuits that are very light, okay? That I'm obviously, if it's small appliance, I'm not going to be putting anything that's not a small appliance on a small appliance. Y'all get the common sense thing here. But I am sure there's other general use application circuits in there that be like, well, there's hardly nothing on this circuit, but you're blowing this one. So maybe I take those two circuits apart, the one that has very little on it, and I take one of the wires off the breaker that is tripping all the time, right? And maybe what I do in that one is I distribute it out a little bit. Okay. Like, well, let's see, this is tripping this breaker. It's pulling so much load. I'm saying, okay, how do I deal with this? Find out what the load is on it and see if I can't distribute some things out a little bit. Or maybe I have to do something. You have to look at it and analyze it that way and see what you can do to be able to try to resolve this issue. Hey, it may be that they're just already have too many circuits coming in. Hell, all you might pull the cover and they might have already spliced two circuits together, going to one breaker, and now you bring the ambient heat onto it and the thing keeps tripping. That type of thing. Maybe it's as simple as looking what loads are on that circuit. Maybe the circuit's overloaded. Maybe they got a specific appliance or something that they're using that they're plugging in. And rather than cost the customer thousands of dollars to rewire everything, you might be like, you know what? Does this seem to happen at a certain time in the day when you're using your coffee maker? I'm just throwing shit out there, folks. And I might suggestion, because you know what? You can be a surgeon when it comes to being an electrical expert, okay? Troubleshooting. Give good money in troubleshooting. And say, well, you know what, dude? You have another circuit that's on this countertop, or you have another circuit that's being used. how about we maybe you move that appliance to that circuit, or maybe you move this to this. And, other than that, maybe we do have to look for an overcurrent device that's rated for continuous use and see if they are available. They may be. You get my point? You're going to have to do it. But again, you could have, my point was, you take a breaker that's rated for normal standard testing, you put it in an environment where the ambient temperature is going to be above that, and yes, you're going to get premature tripping. You're going to get things happen, and you're going to say, well, this is a defect. It's not a defect. It's condition of use and where you put it. And again, it is what it is. You get what I'm saying? All right, electrical equipment may also be marked with its short circuit current rating. That is very typical for electrical equipment. Panels itself that have an SCCR rating in there. Of course, the breaker will have its interruptive rating, AIC rating marked on it. And then, of course, you have, and again, these are 110.9 and 110.10, by the way, in your NEC. But the equipment itself, all of the frame, everything in the equipment will have an SCCR rating, which usually is going to be equal to or greater than the available fault current. Because we want the assembly, we want the equipment to be able to withstand what? A fault current. And it has to be equal to, okay? The SCCR has to be equal to, all right? So, short circuit ratings is the ability for the equipment, again, we're talking SCCR right now, for the equipment to withstand a fault current equal to or less than the short circuit rating for the length of time it takes the specified overcurrent device to open the circuit at the equipment, okay? So usually this is done from the manufacturers. You'll get a breaker with an AIC rating in it, and then you'll get a short circuit rating for the equipment. Let's say it's 22,000 SCCR, and then the breaker will be 22,000 at least, interruptive rating. And again, everything works happy. And then all you have to do is make sure that you know what your available fault current is from the utility down. And usually they may give it to you at the secondary of the transformer. And then you just have to use a calculator like Cooper-Bussmann, which is owned by Eaton. They have a really simply calculator that as long as you put in the length of conductor, always use infinite bus because you don't know anything different. Measure the length, put in the type of conductors you got, whatever. It'll give you an idea of what it is down at the equipment. And remember, the longer your conductors from the source, the available fault current is going to be less and less and less. It's going to go down as it further gets into the building. Now, when in big commercial industrial facilities, when can that have the opposite effect? It's always going to be less available fault current as it gets further away from the source because of the impedance that's in the conductors and the equipment. But here's where it can get funky for some big industrial facilities that have big motors. So when you're powering these motors, everything's great, okay? But when the power goes off, these motors now, they're still turning. They act like a generator, and they're pumping power back momentarily into the system. So again, that is where you have to make sure that the equipment is rated for the available fault current for what could be backfed into the system in those large industrial facilities. So sometimes there's a lot more rules involved in that because that is basically a big generator, right? That type of thing. Now, usually going to be less than what you would have as the available fault current from the utility than you would from a motor or something, and it's not going to be as long in duration until that motor winds down. But at the end of the day, still stuff that a design professional needs to take into consideration when you're buying the equipment. Good news, again, when you're pricing all this stuff out, your Snyder rep, your Eaton rep, your Siemens rep, whatever, your Federal Pacific rep, they will give you assistance, okay? Your Zinsco rep. There's a trigger words on social media. There you go. All right. Now, fuses and circuit breakers. The short circuit and ground fault current have the following characteristics. One, flow outside the normal current path. Okay, so obviously short circuit and ground fault are flowing through a device not on its intended path, right? A circuit's designed to flow on its intended path, on the conductors that you construct, right? Anything that flows back to the source on an unintended path outside of normal current flow can be classified as things like short circuit and ground fault protections. Not overloads. Overloads are running on the same conductors, the same current circuit path. It's just that it is in excess of what the circuit's rated for, okay? But short circuit and ground fault, they are making a path, whether it's a fault or a short, it's happening and it's trying to go outside of a normal path of current flow. Now, it may be greater than the normal current flow. Obviously, short circuit and ground faults could, but it may be less than the normal current flow. You could have a short circuit or ground fault that is a delayed or not as impactful as it would be as a bolted fault, for example. And so you could have it. So that would be one of the characteristics you have to be aware of. And again, this takes care of itself, but it's just something that you know that those are of the three things that you understand that short circuits and ground faults typically are resulting in current that are potentially traveling on paths that they weren't intended, which is energizing metal parts in many cases. That's why we bond. That's why we do what we do. Okay, and that's why overcurrent protected devices have to be sized so importantly, and you don't overfuse stuff. Okay, that's why you don't stick the penny behind the S-type fuses in an old panel board. Okay, no, fuse panel. You don't do that. We know you don't do that. Grandma used to do that. You know that me and you know that you don't do that. Now, for the circuit breaker, however, there is a point at which the opening time cannot be reduced further, but due to the inertia of the mechanical moving parts within the breaker. Okay, so there is an actual unlatching point where, again, that it's just going to trip off, and that's it, and you're going to have to reset it. Right, so at a certain point, you might have a mechanical trip, and you may have thermomagnetic. But there's moving mechanism, moving parts in there, okay? So, that type of thing. So there may be a position where you just can't get it down low enough that it's just going to open up. What about dual element fuses? Time delay fuses, what are these? Okay, so dual element time delay fuses provide a time delay in the low over voltage range. Low overload range, okay? Okay, so that allows, a lot of times we see these time delays that allow, for example, motors, inrush motors, things to come on, so it's got a little bit of delay. So it overloads the circuit temporarily, okay? So it doesn't trip, it doesn't blow the fuse, it overloads a little bit, right? And then that's what you get when you get these time delays. It's giving it a little time to do what it's got to do, a little something. And then it says dual element fuses are ideal for use on motor circuits and other circuits having high inrush current. So again, you'll have your normal protection, and then it allows it, due to the time delay, to get to a higher level, right? And then once it gets running, a lot of this is motor applications, it gets running, then guess what? That current will come back down. Everything will just come back down, right? And so that's what we know. That's a good use for a dual element fuse, or where you may have for the time delay application. Perfectly allows that time to get back down. Okay. And also, by the way, even when it comes to things like circuit breakers and stuff like that, when people see the nameplate on an HVAC outside, God, this seems to be the number one thing. Once it starts propagating all over social media, people's freaking heads spin off. It's like you see a nameplate rating, it says minimum circuit ampacity, maximum overcurrent device, overcurrent protection, and people freak out. Even though this is all based on Article 440. The rules are right in there that the manufacturers use to make these nameplates. It says it right there in 440. And I've done lessons on this. So many people will look at that nameplate. I've seen it all over social media where there'll be something that says minimum 20 amp circuit, branch circuit, maximum 40 amp overcurrent device. And people's heads starts blowing off because they're like, no, the code says you have to protect the conductor at its ampacity. It's only good for this, and you're going to be protecting it at higher. Dude, relax. The small conductor rules in 240.4D have an allowance to say, hey, wait a minute. There's another table here that says if you're dealing with HVAC, if you're dealing with motors, and gives you some other options, it says, look, relax. If you look at that nameplate, you'll see what the running current is. And you'll see that it is more than covered. Usually it covers not only the air conditioning compressor, but also the fan motor, okay? And so the condensing fan. So you'll have that value. Well, the minimum circuit ampacity is going to cover that fine, right? And then you're thinking, well, okay. But what about the overcurrent device? It's too high. And they're like, yeah, because when that thing starts up, that current is going to jam up really quickly. It's going to ramp up real quickly due to this inrush, okay? And it's basically like it's a seizing, we call it seizing its start, where it starts up, okay? And then once it gets up, it's going to go what? It's going to come back down to the nameplate's running current, and it's going to be fine. They say, well, how do I protect that wire? That's because this is a unique thing in the NEC, in the small conductor rules. This is unique because it knows that the overcurrent protected device can be up to 5 and 6 times its rating in order for it to trip. So it's going to still protect it. It's okay. You don't have a problem on a circuit if it's rated for 30 amps and you're pulling 22 amps through it. It's no problem. And if you're saying, well, how is it protecting it? Look, if this is what the label is telling you it pulls, and it's the circuit you're running, then that's what it's going to pull. That's what it's going to pull. They say, but it allows my overcurrent device to be so much larger. I'm worried. And I'm like, no, if there's a short circuit or ground fault, that little difference in amps is not even going to be close, because in order to trip it on a short circuit and ground fault, you have a fault condition. It's going to skyrocket if you do everything right. You do your grounding and bonding right. Do everything right. You're not talking about, so a 20 amp breaker, a 20 amp rated conductor on a 40 amp breaker, you're not going to need 40 amps. It's going to trip, right? But basically what's going to happen is at that fault, it's going to be so much higher, the magnitude, than that 40 amps. It's going to trip. In fact, the higher the current, the quicker the trip. Okay, that's what we call it inversely proportional. The higher the current, quicker the trip mechanism. So by making a low impedance effective ground fault current path, by bonding everything like you're supposed to, doing everything you're supposed to do, if you have a fault, ground fault, guess what's going to happen? Boom, clear that overcurrent device quickly. But the amount of fault current at that time is going to be very high, momentarily. But that breaker can detect it so quickly that is now. That is why breakers come in different trip curves, because there are applications where there is a delay and it starts happening, and that's where we start looking at selective coordinations and when does something trip, or we don't want it to trip too soon because we understand that it could get into this area and we don't want it to trip until it gets here. So you start looking at these curves and make sure you fall nice in there, you know, that type of thing. You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, follow the nameplate. It's going to be fine. If I had $1 for every home inspector that calls out that says minimum circuit ampacity, maximum overcurrent protection, and again, it says maximum overcurrent. Can it be less than the maximum overcurrent protection? Can it be less than 40? If I have a 22 amp, if I have 22 amps and or if I'm putting on a conductor that's good for certain amps and I'm oversizing the overcurrent device because the nameplate lets me, and I'm doing that, at the end of the day, could I use a lesser rating of overcurrent protection because it says maximum overcurrent? Could I be less than that? Yes. Could I use a non-standard type? Yes, right? Maybe it calls for a 40 and I want to use a 35, or I want to use something that's not standard, let's just say. Can I? Yes. Do you run the risk of it still tripping on inrush? Yes, you do. But you could if you wanted, okay? Can't be more, but you could be less, okay? But then you run an issue of whether or not it can handle the inrush and that type of thing. Okay. Dual element fuses can provide both overload protection for motor and branch circuit protection. So again, a lot of these little design circuits that have the overloads built into them, the code allows me to be able to combine not only the overload protection for the motor, but also the short circuit ground fault protection for the motor, all with dual element fuses, okay? So, I mean, there is a possibility in the code for you to do that. Now, be careful if applying non-time delayed fuses. Fast acting fuses, I mean, they basically are just like the circuit breaker. They don't have any delay. You get to a certain level and they trip, okay, or they blow, okay? So be careful if you're using those on a motor, because these fuses cannot handle that high inrush, with the energy efficient motors. So again, be careful. And nobody in their right mind would use a non-time delay or a fast-acting fuse on an application that needs that inrush to be taken in consideration. Unless you're doing a service call and all you got in the truck is a one-time fuse, I would not put that in. If it's fuses, I would not put that on that service call on that HVAC unit, because that's what you happen to have. Because you know what? You will be coming back and you will be making a service call, and don't charge the customer for your ignorance. Okay. Time delay. Okay. Makes sense? All right. Now, table 430.52. Okay. Y'all are familiar with 430.52. That's the short circuit and ground fault protection tables for motors. It shows that the typical motor branch circuit, short circuit and ground fault protection, it says the maximum size permitted for a dual element fuse. Okay, so there's a maximum size in that table. I'm sure y'all have seen that little table. I'll show you that table if you're not familiar with it. You should be familiar with it if you're familiar with motors. By the way, shameless plug, if you have not watched my videos on motors basics, you need to watch the video. It is available over on Fast Track's Tube, and go check it out. I tend to not give a lot of stuff away anymore on my YouTube channels for free, so make sure you check that out. But if you want to know what I'm talking about, this is what we're talking about right here. It's this table right here, right? And I'll blow it up for you. This table right here. This is where you see non-time delay, you see dual element, you see instantaneous trip, and then of course over here, you see inverse time circuit breaker. That's just your standard circuit breaker. So you see typically the values are 250 for inverse time, 800 for instantaneous trip, although you do have one down here for 1100. This is for a specific motor right here, a design B efficient, energy efficient, and design B premium efficiency. They got to put that on the motor, so don't overthink it. They'd have to tell you this. They put it on the motor. Okay. Any other motor, it'd be other than design D, your normal squirrel cage or your AC motor. These are going to fall into these top three. Okay. So typically, again, non-time delay, 300%, dual element time delay, 175%, instantaneous 800, and 250 for inverse if you're going to use a circuit breaker for that application. Okay. So that is based on using the FLC. That's the full load current that is in your tables in the back of 430, 248, 249, 250. That's going to give you the amps that you use for sizing short circuit ground fault protection, conductor sizing, you use that. You're going to use for overloads, you're going to use 430.32. That's the nameplate. The only exception to that is when you're using something like a intermittent duty elevator type motors. Then you're going to go and use the nameplate for that as well for sizing those conductors. But that is a unique rule that you're going to follow under 430.22. Unique, and I can't remember if it's E. I think it's E. That type of thing. Very unique. But for normal everyday applications, always going to use the FLC amps to size the conductors, short circuit ground fault protection, all those type of things. Okay. All right. Anywho, so there you go. So the time delay, the dual element. Okay, the dual element application. Oops, hold on. The dual element application is going to have a maximum of 150%. Notice that's a maximum. Okay. You can't exceed that. Now, you do have some allowances underneath it, some notes, things like that, where something doesn't correspond or the values given, the rating is a non-adjustable and that type of thing. You'll have some allowances for different types of fuses. You have like a CC fuses. But in general, this is a maximum. You don't exceed it. Can you be less than it? Yes. Can you be more at it? Not unless the note says otherwise. And these aren't informational notes. These are notes that are very much applicable where referenced. Okay. For example, inverse time breaker references a note 2. Note 2 says, look, if it's a non-adjustable, those type of things, and it says, hey, if you're dealing with that, we'll let you do this, that type of thing. Okay. All right. Current limiting, RK1 fuses open very quickly under short circuit and ground and high level ground fault situations. Okay. So again, current limiting is basically when you hear somebody talk about a current limiting fuse, it's exactly what it sounds like. It is a specific value, and under a short circuit condition, this is what it's going to open at. Okay. And it's going to be, and it is basically going to limit the amount of current. So you have current limiting fuses. It is not going to let a certain level of current go through the system. Okay. And that may be in a design professional. They may demand use of current limiting fuses in order to keep the level of current at a specific level for whatever piece of equipment or whatever they're doing. They may specify current limiting devices, okay? Now it says a straight current limiting fuse has an extremely fast response in both the low overload and short circuit ranges, okay? So again, be very careful in your selection of these fuses, but if you're going to use current limiting, just remember they're usually dictated by the design professional and when you need to be limiting the current for something. You're not going to want to use those in applications where you have a need for time delay. Okay, it's not going to be the best choice for that type of thing. Let's see, the requirements governing cartridge fuses are contained in part 6 of 240. So cartridge fuses, and I don't think we have a picture of it. Y'all probably are very aware of what a cartridge fuse looks like. But for craps and giggles, we'll just kind of go down here and you can see that we're going to be getting into, oh, I got to go back to 240. Bear with me. I know I'm over. I know. But let's get down into, oops, hold on here. I can hardly see where I'm looking here. Here we go, right here. Okay, you could kind of see a little bit of right here. This is a side profile of a fuse, okay, like a cartridge fuse, okay. That's an example of one. Let's see, I don't know if there's any other pictures. Probably under the definitions of fuses, there might be some different pictures, but basically they look like a barrel and they have contact points on the end. Those are typically what we call your cartridge fuses. The plug fuses or type S fuses or whatnot look like little button fuses that basically the base looks like an Edison base like you would do with a lamp or a light bulb. Okay, Edison base fuses. That type, they screw in, that type of thing. All right, so anyway, you know what those are. All right, so that's where you go if you want to find everything. So if you get an exam type question, it's to ask you something specific about cartridge fuses, then remember part 6, 240 is all about cartridge fuses. All cartridge fuses must be marked to show, all right, exam, I don't know if I got any whoop, 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 whoop. These are exam type stuff. It says all cartridge fuses must be marked to show the ampere rating, voltage rating, interruptive rating, where other than 10,000 amps, current limiting type, if applicable, okay, so if it is current limiting, or it's designed in a way that the fuse mounts into the frame that is only allowed to take certain types of fuses in there, and it may be only allowed to take a current limiting fuse in the way that the piece of equipment is designed, because that's what that disconnect is for, that type of thing. Also, trade name or the name of the manufacturer, like Cooper, Bussmann, or something like that. They make fuses, that type of thing. 240.60B also specifies that fuse holders for current limiting fuses be designed so that the fuse holder cannot accept fuses that are non-current limiting. Okay, so if you have a piece of equipment that is designed to hold current limiting fuses, then these fuses are designed a little differently in how they're designed. They usually have a little different design in the bars that come off of the fuse and how they would mount in. So those current limiting fuses typically will have a specific design. Now, if I have fuse holders that are designed specifically for current, and I think we had a picture of that. There was a picture of that. Hold on. I think there is a picture of that right here. Okay, so here's what we're reading, current limiting, right? So I think, okay, so there's your, okay, there you go. So there's your normal fuses, right? These are just some normal fuses, marked 10,000 amperes, okay? Okay, if it's 10,000 amps, then it doesn't need to mark it. If it's anything other than that, then it needs to be marked. For example, here's, you know, if you had a fuse that goes higher, then it would be, it has to be marked on the fuse, okay? So let's see here. So interruptive rating where other than 10. So it's assumed that's a low-hanging fruit on an exam. Okay, fuses shall be marked. So the basic standard rating is what? 10,000 if it's a question on an exam. And then you're thinking, okay, that's fine. The next question is somebody always asks, like, Paul, I get that one, Broheem, but what about circuit breakers? All right, well, just so we cover all of that scenario, 10,000 for a fuse, The interruptive rating, it says every circuit breaker having an interruptive rating other than 5,000 shall have its interruptive rating shown on circuit. So remember, exams, 5,000 is your base for a circuit breaker, 10,000 is your base for a fuse. If it's other than that, it has to be marked, okay? I just thought it was important to show you that. Because, I mean, we're in this topic, right? So I figured, why not? I mean, you know, we're talking about these different things, so might as well, you know, give you the goodies, all right? All right, now let's see here. So here you go. So current limiting, let's see here. So let's see here. I thought I had a picture. I thought it had a picture here. Let me see. I swore I saw one. Nope, it's not there. Not sure where I was just at. Let's see. Okay, there you go. So this is kind of a better way to see it. Right here, okay? So this is an example. So you see the fuse is kind of, you know, we're looking parallel down the fuse, right? And here's the bus that's going to connect onto the fuse holder. This is the fuse holder, okay? It says below is an example of a current limiting fuse. The fuse holder with rejection features, okay? Rejection. So this right here, see this? See this little bar right here? That means that it will only take a fuse that has this little cutout in it, which is going to be a current limiting fuse. So this is a current limiting fuse holder. It will only take these types of fuses. Okay? Have I ever seen anybody go in there and remove this in a pinch because they're an emergency call in the middle of the night? I'm going to take the fifth on that, but I'm going to say, not by me, by the way, I wouldn't do it. But at the end of the day, that would be altering the piece of equipment, and you better hope it never catches on fire. There's a reason this blew in the first place, so altering this by removing this so that you could use a standard fuse in there that doesn't have current limiting on it. And again, this current limiting fuse is there for a reason, right? It's to limit the amount of current to the equipment that holds this fuse holder. However the manufacturers have designed it that way, that's what their intent is, okay? So you go altering it, guess what? Lawsuit, baby. Something happens, we're coming after you, okay? Now, most low-cost, common standard, non-renewable, one-time fuses are considered what we say Class H fuses, okay? So just typical, I like to, if you got to remember anything, just think of H as just, you know, a standard, you know, everyday low-cost fuse. H is homie, don't play that type of fuse, okay? It's just a regular fuse, or it's happy. All right. Different classes. Now, Class K fuses are grouped into 3 categories. So if you're not familiar with fuses, most of you are. If you've been working with big equipment that has fuses, most things circuit breakers today. But if you got a lot of times when you get higher current, or they want to do a lot of very high detailed selective coordination, fuses are a little easier to do this with. So you'll run into fuses. It says Class K fuses are grouped into 3 categories: K1, K5, K9. The Class K1 fuses have a greater current limiting ability. Class K9, okay, so that's K1. K9 fuses have the least current limiting ability. So in these K classes, that means 1 has the higher range of current limiting ability, and the 9 is on the lower scale, okay? It's not as current limiting as a K1 would be. Class J fuses are current limiting and are also marked, okay, and are so marked as such. Certain Class J fuses are also considered to be dual element time delay fuses. So this is just stuff that most of the manufacturers will tell you the type of fuse that's needed for the system, okay? So again, not brain surgery. You don't have to be an expert in all the different fuses, but it's just things to think about. Class L fuses are current limiting fuses and are bolt-on. So L comes obviously in different amp ratings, but again, bolt-on fuses are used to bolt pressure contact or high pressure switches, okay? So you need if something calls for a Class L fuse, there you go. It's going to be current limiting, but it's typically a bolt-on design. And then you cut Class T fuses are physically smaller than the Class H, which we said was our happy homie, or Class J, which are current limiting, but can be dual element or time delay. It says the T is the configuration of this type of fuse limits its use to fuse holders and switches that will reject all other type of fuses. So if I have a fuse holder that accepts Class T, it's designed to only accept class T and reject any other. So this is going to be either in the blade design, specific length of the fuse under this class. Something in the fuse is going to be designed in a way that it can only accept those type of fuses. Again, this is not exam prep for this. This is not brain surgery. This is just understanding the information about the different types of fuses. That's all it is. All right, class G are cartridge fuses with small physical dimensions. Class G fuses are current limiting and are often used for the protection of, okay, so these are very small. These are found in ballasts, electric heating circuits, and similar loads. Okay, so this sounds like the class G is usually going to be provided by a manufacturer. It's probably going to be integral to certain things, right? And these fuses may or may not be supplemental protection, okay? Class R fuses is a non-renewable cartridge type, are divided into two subclasses. We saw earlier that being RK1 and a class RK5. Now, when it says non-renewable, I think of fuses, be honest with you, and most of them is all of them being just, one and done trash. But again, I don't do a whole lot in the fuse world, that type of thing. But all the fuses that I ever dealt with, if they blew, they gone. You know what I'm saying? And if they're made of paper and all that kind of stuff, everybody asks me if they get exposed to water or moisture and that type of thing. Obviously, they're not something that's reconditionable. You can't recondition standard circuit breakers, regular circuit breakers, molded case, and you certainly couldn't reuse fuses. So if it's subject to rain or moisture or anything like that, fire alarm going off, getting on it, obviously y'all know to just replace the fuses, right? It is not reconditionable. Y'all know that. Then we have Class CF fuses that are often used in original equipment manufacturer's products. So again, it could be a Class CF that comes from the manufacturers, might be integral to the circuitry for internal protection. And then you got Class CC fuses, are primarily used for control circuit protection. They're probably going to be integral into circuit boards and things like that. Probably going to find those in things like motor control centers and all that, and the motor control circuit boards and all that kind of stuff. Small little transformer, integral, these little Class CC, these little teeny babies that are in there, that type of thing. Probably, again, already provided by the manufacturer, and it's probably nothing me as an electrician I'm going to screw with, maybe. Unless you're working at HVAC and you're maybe working with some of the little control boards or something like that that has integral fuses, then you may deal with some Class CC small. I'm not a fuse expert, by the way. I can tell you what the code says about fuses. I can tell you how to do fuses. I can talk about the requirements for fuses. But as far as being that guy that can tell you everything about the fuses, hell no. That's why you want to go to the manufacturers of fuses. They should know. Their codes and standard team should know. I'll tell you everything you need to know about wire and cable. And I'll tell you everything you need to know about the NEC. But I can't tell you anything about the internal workings of products that are manufactured by other people. That's why you go to the experts, okay? Don't listen to somebody out there. Like when I correct people about MC cable on social media, I know about MC cable. I have no less than 6 patents on MC cable. Might be more like 8 now. We just got a couple more, right? Okay. Does the hog know fuses? The hog may know fuses. Yeah, go check out the hog and see. We're running over. I'm about 2 hours into this thing now, so I'm not going to check the hog. But ask the hog, say, hog, trade up, please explain to me the Class R fuses and where they may be used. And maybe the hog will give you some detail. The hog kind of sticks to code, so we'll have to see, because it's going to have to pull historical data from the internet for that. But the reality, the hog's trying to look for code, and the code NEC, I'm an NEC guy, doesn't get into the detailed components of the fuses. It just tells you about the fuses and all that kind of stuff. So it might be the same way. I don't know. I don't know what Jeff has programmed additionally into that. Could be. All right. One last slide for today, folks. I know we're running behind, so again, I am sorry. All right. So fuses, Article 240, Part 5 spells out the requirements for plug fuses, fuse holders, and adapters. Okay. So everything, the little ones that you would screw in, those type of things, is all covered in Part 5. So on an exam, you get a question about plug fuses, fuse holders in general, adapters, all this kind of stuff, the Type S adapters, all that kind of stuff. You know where to go now. Part 5, right? It says electricians will be most concerned with the requirements for plug fuses, fuse holders and adapters. Edison-based plug fuses may be used only, okay, listen, Edison-based plug fuses may be used only as replacements to existing installations if there is no evidence of overfusing or tampering. So we're not going to see any equipment made today anyway that's going to utilize Edison-based fuse holders. They just don't make them. They do make replacements, and obviously if you're buying them and using them, these fuses, you're going to be doing it in a replacement, that type of thing. The only thing is that you can't replace it if there's evidence of where there's been overfusing or tampering or putting that penny behind it, or you see that it's discolored all around it. If there's any evidence of that, then the code is like, look, don't try to put an Edison-based fuse back in there, okay? Now, back in the day, we used to take those Edison-based, and when we buy replacement, we get those little ones that have the little button on it so they act like a circuit breaker. That was pretty cool at the time, okay? So these are just your regular Edison-based. Now, in new installations, if you're going to do a new installation, so the old Edison-based, if you're going to do new installations, the installation must have fuse holders requiring type S plug fuses or fuse holders, okay? Type S. And so if I were to go to the code real quick, again, you're not going to find that today. Now, okay, so what you will find is pieces of equipment that still have an integral Edison base into the switch. So it may be something like a separate device that is for a piece of equipment that's built with a switch, which is the disconnect, and it'll have a built-in Edison base. That is fine, okay, because that is a newly listed piece of equipment. Nobody's creating panels generally anymore. I can't think of anybody that would use Edison base, okay? But let's kind of look at this real quick. Let's go to the NEC and see what it says. So where we're at here, by the way, is right here, okay? So y'all see this right here at part 5. And you see it's not big, right? Not big. And here's what we're talking about, the Edison base. So let's just go here. So you're going to click it. So in an exam, if you have a question about a plug fuse, fuse holders or whatnot, don't waste your time in the index. Just remember, part 5. Boom. I'm going there. I'm looking for fuses, for plug fuses, fuse holders, adapters, and of course, if I'm looking for cartridge fuses, I'm going to what? Those types of scenario. I'm going to be like, okay, if I need that, I need to go to part 6. Okay, get that in your mind where you need to go. All right, so we're here. Let's go on and get here. Okay, so here is our plug, these little round ones you've seen. I don't think we have a picture of them, but anyway. Okay, so these plug fuses shall be permitted to be used in what? In circuits not exceeding 120 volts between conductors. Okay, so just your 120 volt circuits. Makes sense, right? And when have you ever seen that otherwise? Usually when your old panels with the plug fuses, it also has the bigger ones you pull out. They have the cartridge fuses in there, so that makes sense. Let's see here, marking, yada yada yada, hexagonal configuration. Okay, this is low hanging fruit on an exam, by the way. If it's 15 amps or lower, it's going to have a hectagonal shape to the glass viewing area. Okay, in the top. All right, and that type of thing. That tells you that it's 15 amps or less. Let's see here. The one. Okay, so replacement. Okay, so here we are. Edison-based fuses. Plug fuses of the Edison-based type shall be classified at not over 125 volts and 30 amperes and below. Okay, so we have a threshold, and again, 30 amps and less. Right, and there's that and in there, and not over 125 volts. Well, we just saw before where it wouldn't be usable on anything other than 120 volt circuits, and that's all it was ever used for. So that's a no-brainer, but at least there. Now, replacement only. It says plug fuses of the Edison-based type shall be used only for replacements of existing installations where there is no evidence of overfusing or tampering. You're the electrician. Now, if you walk in there and you see what Johnny homeowner's been doing for years, and they're only calling you because it's finally melted down so much that the little penny behind the plug fuse ain't going to work anymore, and they're like, dude, you look at it and you go, shit, this is melted so much, I can get a quarter back there now. That's a problem. You're not going to be using these Edison bases, okay? I'm just saying. Now, you do have pieces of equipment that have Edison bases that are built into it for the existing equipment, like we said. And that says fuse holders of the Edison-based type shall be installed only where they are made to accept type S fuses by the use of adapters. And here's your type S fuse. And again, here's your classifications for this. Type S fuses, not to exceed 120 volts, and 0 to 10 amperes, 16 to 20 amperes, and 21 to 30, different types, okay? And they're non-interchangeable, okay? Once those suckers screw in there, they will only take S type, okay? All right, and then of course you've got some other stuff down here about the use of the Edison-based fuse holders, S adapters, to fit the type S only, yada, yada, yada. I don't need to go. Interchangeability, non-tamperable, all that kind of good stuff. And I don't know if we have a picture. There you go. So this right here, so that's the adapter. Notice the difference. This is an S-type fuse. Goes in this S adapter. Okay? You can't get regular Edison-based fuses in there once you put this adapter in there. But in order to use Edison-based, even if the piece of equipment happens to be new and it's maybe like one of those little switch with an Edison base in it that's built into it, like for a heater, if that's the case, that needs to be designed to take only S. And it's got to accept a S-type adapter in there to only allow S to be used in it. Other than that, we're not using standard plug fuses anymore, unless you're doing it in a replacement and then there's no damage evident, that type of thing. Make sense? Okay, y'all get that. I don't need to beat that one to death. I said, let's see. All right, that's it. So last we'll do a knowledge check question, and we'll go do a couple drawings, and then I'm going to cut you guys loose because it's 2 hours. So hell much for coffee hour. Okay, that's why nobody's following me anymore. Look at that. I'm down to like 25 people. Nobody wants to follow long-winded Abernathy because he just goes on and on for hours. All right, so additional standard ratings for fuses are 1, 3, 6, and blank amperes. What do you think the answer is? Okay, so now where do you go to find standard ratings of overcurrent devices, whether it's fuses or circuit breakers? Remember, standard ratings. What's the code article you go to? Where do you go in the code? What table do you go to? I'm waiting. Come on, bro. Where do I go to find the standard ratings for fuses? All right, you guys are killing me. No, Rob, no, I mean, I don't get a lot of followers. You know what I'm saying? That's what I mean. I mean, I like people that follow me want to know the code. I don't get other people out there because I'm not engaging. I'm not funny. I'm not shaking the boobies. You know what I'm saying? I get you guys that are dedicated to code. And that's all I want. That's all I want. So if I never get another follower, as long as I got people that want to learn code, I'm happy. I don't care about the number of clicks. That type of thing. I want people that are going to actually want to learn something. You know what I'm saying? But I do get a lot of followers. I mean, let's face it. Let me be real with you, Rob. You know, because I got to quantify this for folks. Let me be real with you. If I've got 45,000 followers or 40,000 followers, just beatbox. If I have 40,000 followers on YouTube and I put out a video and the video only gets watched by 300 people, okay? You know what I'm saying? I see you, Cray Cray. You're not shadow banned. I see you. If only 300 people watch my video, but I've got 40,000 followers, why are they following me? I would just be happy if they just stopped following me. I'm okay with that. I think people don't understand what I'm saying when I say these things. I am okay with only having 100 followers if they're learning something. I don't want people following me on social media just to follow me to run the numbers up, because I don't rely on followers for my income. I don't have my sites aren't monetized. The only one that's monetized is YouTube. You get what I'm saying? So I don't care. And a lot of people use me for code, and then once they're done with me. They move on to something else. They go watch, you know, Dustin or somebody else because that's entertaining. He puts a lot of effort into his videos. I do not. Okay. What you get from me is what you get. And so that's why I don't have a lot of followers. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, all right, there you go. Cray. Absolutely. Everybody that's been posting 240.6a. Again, obviously there's a delay. You get what I'm saying? There's a delay. I get it. All right. So again, yes. So you're absolutely right. So 601 is exactly the answer. Oh, we're going to do another knowledge check. Okay. Now, funny thing about 601, people say, well, what does that 601 mean? This actually, Paul's up in a crane. You're all right, Paul. You do you. Don't fall out of that crane. I need you to make that dollar. So you work on that crane. So the 401 is an example where typically they want to have a 600 amp circuit. They size everything to 600 amps, right? But they want to use an 800 amp rated disconnect or the frame. So the difference is there's a 600 amp fuse that has a certain layout of fuse design, but its normal 600 would not fit inside of, let's say, because they do make a 600, it will not fit in. Remember I told you could use standard sizes and then you could use non-standard. It will not fit in the framing of an 800 amp. So 800 amp is greater than 600. It's not going to hurt the equipment to be rated 800, right? But if I'm sizing everything and it's a 600 amp, let's say load, then I want to be able to put a fuse in there to protect the circuit. So that would allow, it would receive a 601, which is basically the fuse that is sized the same parameters as the frame if it was an 800 amp. It's just 601. So it's limiting it. Okay. You get what I'm saying? That type of scenario, right? So that's why that would be. The next says to find the maximum rating of a dual element fuse used for a motor branch circuit short circuit protection, you multiply the motor FLC by what percentage? Okay, so so what's the answer here? And what's the table that you would go to find this percentage? We looked at it earlier. So if it is a dual element fuse, right? Where are we going to go? All right, dual element fuse, where are we going for the motor circuit? And all we're asking for is the maximum rating of the fuse. That's all we're asking. Maximum rating of the fuse, not the overcurrent protected device. We haven't selected that yet. We just want to find out what the maximum rating is of the dual element fuse for this motor circuit based on an FLC of the motor. Y'all heard me tell you earlier what we use, what table we use. And no, it's not 240.6. Okay. What table did I tell you? There you go. Val got it. Right there. 175. Where do we get that from? Well, that was table 430.52, right? Because that was the short circuit ground fault protection for motors based on the FLC. Remember I told you earlier? And so in this case, the answer is 175 because that's what it is under dual element fuse, okay? And 175, okay? All right, let's see here. All right, we're going to get into, so, okay, good. Let through current characteristics. Okay, good. We're going to get into that tomorrow. All right, so again, a little bit of what we're going to get into tomorrow. I'll do some drawings, but tomorrow we're going to talk a little bit about fuses, how they're tested. We're going to talk about delta, three-phase, corner-grounded B systems, all those type of things a little bit, and how that's fused. We're going to talk about time curve characteristics, peak let-through charts, circuit breakers, thermomagnetic. We're going to talk about those type of things, interruptive ratings of circuit breakers. We are going to talk about something that I talked about earlier, which was series rated breakers versus straight rated breakers. Okay, and the nuances. I kind of alluded to that earlier today in this episode, but we're going to be talking about that a little bit and give you some examples of that. Right, and we'll talk about current limiting circuit breakers and give you a little bit of that. And we'll talk costs, why you would maybe design one over the other if you're really in the real world. And again, we'll wrap around. No, not 300, Marlon. Not 300. Look again. So we would wrap ourselves around. We're talking time delay, okay? So we'll talk about that again in tomorrow's episode. So Marlon, it's 175. All right, let's do some giveaways really quickly. I know I'm pushing y'all for time, but let's go. Do some giveaways. A little over. Marlon, go look at 430.52. Time delay. All right, let's see here. Battles, you already have probably a Fast Tracks Tube subscription. No, we can't refund you if you already purchased one. No, if you already have one for the enhanced. People ask me that all the time. Well, if I won one here, can I get my money back for the one I purchased? No, you can't. Okay. But if you already have it, we can spin again for you. So if you'd like to spin again, I'm more than happy to spin again. But Jonathan, that's what it has you down. Or we can add additional extended time onto the one you already have. You just remind us. Okay. He wants to spin again. All right, we'll spin again. This is for Jonathan. Spinning again. No music on this one. We're just spinning to get it over with, Jonathan. All right, Jonathan, we got the 2023 enhanced. And you might already have that as well. I don't know. But you're in the drawing for it. Doesn't mean you'll win it. And you could get it and you could gift it to somebody. That type of thing. All right, let's spin. Let's do this again. Or we could probably mark it down, Jonathan, and when the 2026 comes out, maybe we can extend it to the 2026. I don't know. I do things like that from time to time. Never go off memory, Marlon. That's what happens in an exam. It means that we're just guessing, and we don't want to guess. So the rule of thumb is if you don't know, you don't say. That's always been my rule of thumb. It's kind of the same way on an exam. Don't run the risk of guessing. But I get it. Participating, and that is important that we got you participating. Dan, you got a Fast Tracks Tube subscription. For those that don't know how to do that, just go to fasttrackstube.com, go to the membership, click the membership, do the free membership. If you already have it, let me know, Dan. I will re-spin again. Here earlier, 175. All right, 420. And you're in the drawing for the ultimate coin. My favorite coin, by the way. So there you go. All right, I'm not sure what you mean by battle. That'd be great. So I'm assume we'll just keep you in the drawing for the 2023 enhanced, Jonathan. All right, let's go again. So Pape, you're in the drawing for the coin. And the funny thing is, Jeff made a comment. He said, damn, we're going to get to the drawing for the second quarter before we even get all the stuff delivered from the first one. I promise you, you're going to get your stuff if you won. Don't worry. Those that won courses already have their courses, okay? We were delayed because, one, Jeff needed some more names, and two, the mailers, we were out of the mailers and they were back ordered, but they have arrived. So all of them are packed and they're ready to go. We're just going through the names. So just sit tight. Ain't no big deal. Ain't none of my shit that I send you for free is the end of the world. You know what I'm saying? Come on, you'll get it. Relax. All right. All right, Van Man. So you have got the 2023 flashcards. You're in the drawing for that. So that's the 2023 flashcards that are available. So you're in the drawing for that. Okay. Anyway, correct. Bad decision. That's all good. It's all good. All right, good deal, Jonathan. We can extend you out. All right. All right, folks. I'm going to let you go. Again, for those out there that have come all the way to the end, we will not be streaming anymore on Instagram. We're going to end that. We don't really get anything out of Instagram. There's not enough followers, and it's a weird platform. So we're gonna, you know what? Again, we don't care. I mean, if we lose people from there, we don't care. But you care to learn, and I care that you care, that you care, that I care, that I care, that you care, and that's what we want to do, right? Okay? So, Cray Cray says, I'm too excited. Oh, I forgot. What's today? Hump day. Make it a good day. Do something productive. Teach somebody something, right? And most importantly, learn something yourself. I like to learn something every day. I am not a know-it-all. Anybody tells you that, don't know me. I love to learn every day. As long as I'm living and breathing and I'm on this earth, I want to learn something new every freaking day. Okay? Day. I want to learn. All right? All right, folks. Till next time. What's up? Oh, Jonathan, yes. You saw it. I showed you a picture of it. It's coming. Till next time, folks. Stay safe. God bless. We'll catch you tomorrow where we'll pick up where we left off. And we'll talk about circuit breakers and current limiting and adjustables. And we'll even revisit that HVAC situation. We'll talk about straight rated breakers. We'll talk about all those kind of things, okay, tomorrow. Make sure you're here, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Let's go.